And good morning and good afternoon to you all. From the Penn Institute for Urban Research and the Volcker Alliance, this is Special Briefing. I'm Bill Glasgall, and I'm here with my co-host, Penn IUR co-director Eugenie Birch. Eugenie's joining us from Urban Days at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. Hello, Eugenie.
Hi, Bill. How are you?
I'm just terrific, and thank you so much for dialing in from 3,000 miles away. We're going to get back. We're going to get back to the OECD in 1 second, but right now it's a good time to focus on global cities. At the OECD and here at Special Briefing. And we're drawing on the networks of Penn IUR and the Volcker Alliance to help bring some light and surface some strategies for dealing with some of the issues that are common to many metro areas around the world. These are issues such as growth, transportation, housing, public health, infrastructure, and balancing their budgets. And the latter, perhaps the greatest immediate challenge, given global growing trade tensions, fiscal retrenchment in the US, and the chance of recession. We'll be hearing about this from Eugenie and our panel of mayors in just a moment, but first this word. Special briefings are made possible by funding from the Travelers Institute, the Volcker Alliance, and members of the Penn IUR Advisory Board. We're coming to you live on the Penn IUR and Volcker Alliance websites and also on the Special Briefing podcast. And as always, we've taken your questions in advance and we'll address them later in the program. And now let's focus on cities. Our global panel today includes Jaime Pumarejo, former mayor of Barranquilla, Colombia, Nasiphi Moya, executive mayor of Tshwane in South Africa, which includes the national capital of Pretoria. And from the US, two former big city mayors, Steve Adler of Austin, Texas, and Stephanie Miner of Syracuse, New York. And Stephanie's author of her new memoir, Madam Mayor, which I encourage you all to read. Welcome to you all. But before we begin this exciting panel discussion, as I mentioned a moment ago, Eugenie Birch, who's Penn IUR's co-founder along with Susan Wachter. Eugenie is at the OECD this week for Urban Days. So Eugenie, tell us about what you're hearing from the mayors and the experts there. And I understand you've also got some thoughts on a new EU infrastructure report that just came out. Eugenie?
Sure, Bill. It's a very exciting time here in Paris at the OECD. This is the initial day of a 4-day conference called Urban Days. It's preparatory to the ministerial conference that will happen in Poland in May. And the purpose of this conference is to bring to the attention or bring ideas to the attention of that ministerial conference so that basically some of the member states will begin to realize how important continue to realize how important cities are. So there are a few hundred people here. The days are organized first today with the Champion Mayors session this morning, where they discussed housing and mobility and so forth, and a very exciting session this afternoon, which I'll talk about in a minute. Tomorrow, they're going to turn to the circular economy and talk about various ways that European cities and other cities around the world are working on these ideas of the circular economy. You know, the 35 members of the OECD, it's not just Europe, it's people from all over the world, developed economies. And so they're getting some pretty exciting ideas from Japan, from Indonesia, from France, from Germany, et cetera. The third day is looking at local action and what's happening in the sustainability area. Particularly, we have the COP coming up in Belém, and there's a lot of preparation for what's happening there. And lastly, on the 17th is on financing cities, perhaps the most important topic of all from our point of view, which we at Penn IUR will be sponsoring one of the panels on that, as well as there'll be some city-to-city comparisons as to what they're doing in urban development and a special session on real estate. There'll be other side events going on, looking at data, looking at various things. At this meeting, they're going to be releasing 15 reports. I couldn't believe it when they said that. They released the first one today, which is on aging and what we need to be doing about aging. And in fact, this afternoon, our session first was talking about cities for all. And we had speakers from UN Habitat. We had, of course, the head of OECD talking about what they're thinking about, and particularly this issue that by 2040, 1 in 4 all people in the OECD countries will be an older person. This has huge impacts for how we plan our cities, how we design our cities, what happens to employment, to jobs, what the ratio is to the youth, and so forth. We then had talks by Anna Claudia Rosenbach, sorry, from UN Habitat, who's emphasizing this issue of housing. And this is an issue, of course, we'll be talking about today with all of our mayors and how critical it is around the world. And then we had a few other mayors talking about what they have been doing to address this issue of integrating youth and younger adults and older adults in their economies. And particularly of interest was the governor of Tokyo talking about special programs they have, a premier university for all of us who are over 60 to go to in Tokyo. The idea, of course, is to reskill and to keep address this issue of loneliness and not belonging to in these particular groups. So I must say, this is quite exciting. We've got a lot of happening right now. We just stepped out from the coffee hour where everybody's talking about what's happening in the world with issues from the United States and our treatment of nations and hence cities. And I think we'll be talking about that in a few minutes, but maybe I'll turn this back to you, Bill, to get on with the panel, and we'll talk about some of these other problems later.
Well, thanks so much, Jeannie. We'll be back to you in just a moment, but now let's get right to our mayor's panel. Mayor Jaime Pumarejo, former mayor of Barranquilla, Colombia, and outgoing executive director of Breathe Cities. You've been a visionary in many ways in green infrastructure. But tell us about that, about where Barranquilla sits in the middle of our very turbulent world right now, and good to see you again and join us.
Even before Jaime talks, I just want to bring to your attention that Barranquilla was brought up today in this conference as an exemplary city.
Yes, and thank you, Ginny and Bill, and especially as we did work a lot with the OECD as one of the champion mayors for I would say inclusive growth and sustainability, and it was always with the idea of how can you do things that are smart investments. So how can you build a greener city, but with the idea of making it more equitable, making it more sustainable, and adapting to climate change? Because even though for some people, climate change can be a myth or a hoax or a discussion on a dinner table, in Colombia, it's a very real thing. Every couple of years, we're having storm cycles that are worse than the ones we've had a couple of years before. And the people that suffer the most are the ones that have the least opportunities because they have the less affordable the most in-risk housing because they were constructed in manners that are not as withstanding to a flood or a storm. They built their neighborhoods in places where they are propense to flooding or to landslides. So we have a lot of work to do. And we started looking at what could we do. And in that area, we made a plan, a long-term plan of adapting our city and doing it in a way that was, I would say, possible to us because we are a middle-income city in a developing country. We don't have all the resources available to us. So we have a lot of things to do, but we don't have the money to do it. So how do you do that? And we started looking at our own financing and propping that up and making sure that we make good investments that will become, I would say, self-sustainable. So just to give you an example, we made a 5-kilometer boardwalk in front of our river, our waterfront project. We developed a project with AECOM where we said we have 300 meters wide and 5 kilometers long of industrial zone that can be rezoned and repurposed. But at the same time, we have to protect it because if we don't raise the level of that waterfront, then rising sea levels and more water in the river is going to cause us to flood. So what can we do? And we ended up making a project that cost around $300 million. And we made a beautiful waterfront and raised the level of that area of the city, rezoned it for new development and mixed use, which includes affordable and public housing as well. And we reshifted all of that. Today, the waterfront gets 10 million people visiting a year from all types of places, but of the social economical strata of the city. And at the same time, it paid for itself, because when we reappraised the land around it, within 7 years, we were able to change or recuperate the investment. And now we're seeing condos come up, we're seeing industry move out and give way to commercial, residential, and cultural areas. So it's stuff like that. And just to give you another example, we started looking at our floodwater system. We've invested more than $1 billion in the last 12 or 14 years in floodwaters because of more water more quickly. 10 years ago, we had the worst flood or rain season in our history, and we had 30,000 people, 30,000 homes affected. But we fast forward to 10 years after we made smart investments, and we only had 3,000 homes invested in what was, in 2023, the worst flood season in our history, or rain season. So they worked. But what did we learn? We learned that if you plant trees, they make water stay on the tree, on the canopy of the tree for a while, so you don't have to have as big of an investment. You don't need your canals to be as wide or as deep, and that means hundreds of millions of dollars that you can save in the long run. So trees are good investments. Also, we learned from London that if you plant a tree-lined street, you will command a 15% higher property value, because people like to live in tree-lined streets. So you will reduce the cost of electricity, you will reduce the cost of managing your floodwaters, and at the same time, you will make your citizens happy and you will raise taxes. So it's a win-win combination. And those are the types of things we've been doing to try and, I guess, rebuild the city in a proper way, but make sure that citizens get, I guess, a city where it's worth living. And I would also note that we've made a very big issue of making sure that this investment goes to every part of the city, so that, for example, the 384 or 380 parks that have been recuperated or built from new in the city have been in every corner of the city. So everybody can feel that they have something very close to their house.
That's amazing, Jaime. Really incredible. Congratulations for all that work. And I know you'll be doing more things in the future with Breathe Cities and other projects that you're engaged in. Mayor Moya. Hi. Now, Latin America experienced its growth in the late 2000s and earlier. Africa and your country is experiencing rapid growth right now, and that is putting all sorts of pressures, I think, probably on you as mayor, on your budgetary issues and the services that you need to give. You want to tell us a little bit about some of the issues that you've been facing?
Yes, so good afternoon from South Africa. So I think firstly, the population rate in Tshwane is growing rapidly. In 2011, we had over 2 million residents. That number has increased to over 4 million. So obviously this now comes with the resources that needs to be invested, in our communities. One of the things that has been a biggest challenge in the city of Tshwane is the recovery from COVID. We have not recovered from COVID. As a result, our city has had an unfunded budget since 2021. For the first time at our March meeting, in our council meeting that William watched, we tabled a fully funded budget. This is after 4 years. You would understand the impact of an unfunded budget. That means you are spending money that you don't have, and it has landed us on very, precarious grounds in terms of how we deal with our creditors. But how we've been able to get to this stage in a very short space of time, as you'd know, I've been a mayor since October 2024. I've been a deputy mayor before, but as the mayor with the new administration in South Africa, now we've got this concept of coalitions. So with my coalition, we've been in power since October. And one of the things that we targeted was the issue of getting a fully funded budget, because it does have an impact in how we deal with other affairs of the city. How we got there, I think, discipline in how we deal with our creditors and debtors. So just briefly, at the end of December, our debtors book was at over 29 billion rand, and it was continuing to increase. It just shows you that, we've been dealt with the customers quite correctly, but also most households and businesses have not recovered from COVID economically. So what we have done, we've introduced a program called the Debt Relief Scheme, where we were able to write off debt of child-headed households, of indigent households, but also gave waivers in terms of interest to household and business so that they can start normalizing their accounts with the city. That initiative in 1 month has reduced our debtors book by 13%. And it helps us because it gives revenue protection, because the moment they are normalized, then people start paying, so which is quite good for us. The other thing that we are doing, we've got big businesses that do not pay their bills on time. There's a program called Tshwane Adima, basically means Tshwane switches off. So in our credit control policy, if you get to a point where you get a red notice, you will see some of us visiting that business to switch them off. It's another way in which we educate business and households to honor their households. So in terms of dealing with our debtors book, those initiatives have assisted us greatly to reduce it. On the side of creditors, in October, we had a creditors book over 11 billion rands. We had the power utility, Eskom, were owing them 6.66 billion rands. That was the end of October, and we're about to approach the court because they had taken us to court threatening to attach our bank account. So what we were able to do is to then get into a payment agreement with Eskom, and I'm happy to say we're able to pay 1 billion rand in a space of 3 months. What has helped us with that is that we're stopping the financial bleed, because that debt was coming with interest. Every month would pay anything between 55 and 70 million rand on interest alone, and that was not sustainable. And then we started to finish off other big creditors. So we've made some strides. But I think what is important is that with us being decisive in dealing with creditors, we're projecting that we'll be saving about 1.3 billion rands on interest alone, because we are paying our creditors on time, especially the big creditors, and we are able to afford salaries, because that's another thing that in South Africa it's quite common that when a municipality is not doing well, then you would find that 2 months go by without paying your staff salaries. You don't budget for increases, you don't give them bonuses, which create another problem in terms of the morale and the culture of the organization. But I think now we have not been able to get to a point where we can start borrowing, which is what we need to fund our infrastructure needs. But where we are, we wouldn't be able to find an environment where we get creditors who can give us at a reasonable percentages. So we're just focusing on council funded revenue sources and the grants we get from our national government. But I'm quite comfortable that the first step was to get the fully funded budget. The next step is to deal with our audit opinion. Once we get an unqualified audit opinion, at least we will be able to start, talking to creditors to give us more credit so that we can fund our infrastructure needs.
Well, you're certainly putting your house in order. That's very exciting what you've done in just a few months, and I'm sure that you'll continue to do this. I know in November you're going to be welcoming, I don't know how many mayors coming for the U20, which is the preparatory meeting before the G20. So you'll have plenty to show and tell them about.
Yes.
And we can compare and contrast financing and distress right after this brief message. This is a reminder that you're tuned into special briefing from Penn IUR and the Volcker Alliance. Thanks again to the Travelers Institute, the Volcker Alliance, and members of the Penn IUR Advisory Board for your support. And don't forget that you can follow the archived editions of today's episode and all of our other special briefings on our websites and on the Special Briefing podcast. And now let's come back to America and to hear from Stephanie Miner and Steve Adler. Stephanie up first. So Stephanie, we've just heard about municipal distress and some restructuring and rebudgeting creative work. You've been through a lot as mayor of Syracuse after the Great Recession. You've written about it. You're now undergoing some new stresses and strains coming from Washington. So give us your impressions.
Well, it's you can pick your metaphor, whether you want to say it's a perfect storm or when it rains, it pours. Cities are coming off a time when they're really flush because there was all of this unprecedented aid from the federal government because of COVID. While everybody knew that these were not going to be recurring revenues, the pressure on mayors and cities to provide programs is to use this money for recurring services, primarily salaries. When that money dries up, you've got these programs and salaries, you've got to find more revenue. That's not happening. We're seeing all across upstate New York already this happen. In my own city of Syracuse, they announced that there's a $27 million deficit, and that's with a 2% tax increase. This morning, I noticed there's a story about a location municipality near Albany that has a 7.7% tax increase on its books. Normally, when this kind of thing happens, you would turn to the state or even the federal government to ask for help. But given the uncertainty that's going on with the federal government, with programs, with Medicaid and Medicare, and this idea that there's a recession, there's not going to be that kind of aid coming through. So you're going to see mayors and cities with this issue of when there is a recession, the needs go up and revenues go down. And so immediately you're going to see they're going to stop hiring. They're going to slow down on that. And then they're going to probably have to do layoffs. And the most expensive services are public safety and public works. So you're going to see less firefighters, less police officers, and less maintenance on public works. And while you're having all of that, of course, these needs are going to continue to escalate for the people in the city and around the city. So the problem that mayors and city councils are going to have is those problems don't go away. There are going to be more people at food banks, tendency to have more crime, more substance abuse. All of those impacts we will start to see in the near term because of this cutback. And if the federal government continues to change or say how it's going to change Medicaid and Medicare, that impacts very needy people. And there's a huge percentage of those in the cities across our country.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. You can see we have some really common problems here in terms of budgets and what we're going to do about our services and so forth. Steve, when you were mayor of Austin, you had COVID to deal with and also had to deal with calling off some important events in Texas. How did you manage that?
It was a real difficult time. I guess what you could say about that is that nature seemed to impose that emergency as opposed to one that's more policy created for us. But COVID was hard, as you recall. Well, we were all trying to figure out what was happening in early March of 2020, and that coincided with our South by Southwest festival, which was the main economic driver in our city. But it was apparent that we had 300,000 people coming to the city. We were looking at the virus and its progress in cities where people were coming from. We made the real difficult decision to cancel South by that year. Horrific decision. I knew that it was going to end some businesses, cause great hardship. But as outrageous and unthinkable as that decision was, Eugenie, a week later, everybody was making the exact same decision. But we're in a crisis now that is not something that nature did. It's something that's more policy oriented, and boy, it's hitting us really hard. The city council in Austin budget projecting a $13 million shortfall for this year, projected to go up to $35 million here in the next couple years. We have stagnant sales tax revenue, our property tax revenue constraint imposed by our legislature that passed a law that caps the revenue increases that cities are allowed to have from property taxes is hitting us at a constraint that's below what just the cost of current services are. We're running into the same thing that Mayor Minor was talking about, the expiration of the ARPA funds. And the net effect of that is that our total budget, which is $5.9 billion, has a $1.4 billion general fund. And I'm not sure if we know at this point what's going to happen. And it's happening in the context where because of the policies that are happening with the tariffs, our industries are being impacted. We have Tesla here in Austin. We have Toyota in San Antonio, and certainly that benefits our economy. And right now, most of the parts they use in those cars are going to be subject to tariffs because they're not being manufactured here. They're being put together here. And that is hitting us. The supply chain disruptions, the increased production costs, leading to manufacturing slowdowns. Tesla was building a new plant just south of the border in Mexico, and now that's been put on hold. We're seeing the same thing in our tech industry, which is a big part of Austin's economy, with rising component costs and supply chain vulnerabilities, but certainly with the investment uncertainties. One of the things that's really driven economic development in Texas, which has been really strong, has been the open trade across the border with Mexico. And I don't think anybody knows at this point. A lot of the funding that we were already awarded and were anticipated getting now has been frozen by the administration. $105 million grant to put a cap over a highway project that's now underway. $30 million grant to fix bridges, a $10 million grant for safe streets. We're in the process of a $900 million cost just phase for our airport expansion. 1/3 of that is federal dollars. We're not sure about that at this point. We don't have a lot of answers down here, Eugenie, but we do have a lot of uncertainty and a lot of risk. We were fortunate in the 8 years that I was mayor, ending in the end of 2022. We had about $900 million in voter-approved affordable housing funds in 3 different elections in that period of time, and thank goodness we did that. Because that's not something that could be recreated right now. We had more housing starts in 2022 than any other city in the country, both on a per capita and absolute basis. Housing prices are coming down in Austin as they are around the country, but real dramatically in our city. But that was because of prior work, and it was anticipated we would continue that work, and we're just dealing with all kinds of uncertainty right now.
Cities around the
Well,
world.
thanks.
There.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Mr. Mayor, panelists, make sure your cameras and mics are turned on as we go to the Q&A. And the point that one point that everybody has made so far is echoed in a question from Joe Consoli, who is a longtime loyal listener, viewer of ours. He was observing that cities have gone from feast to famine, or it's not quite distress, and how come? And we've been urging cities and states to husband their federal funding as carefully and responsibly as possible, not to use federal funding for ongoing programs, but to use them for one-time uses. Some cities did, some cities and states did, some didn't. That's all coming to an end anyway. And on top of that, you have all the uncertainty of grants that are being suspended, held up, revoked. Nobody quite knows the answer, so it's very difficult to budget in that environment, whether you're a city government, a state government, or a consumer. Federal funds for years made up about a quarter, roughly 25 to 30% of state funding. A lot of that state funding flows down to municipalities. During the COVID years, it popped up to closer to 40%. That's not proving to be sustainable politically, economically, perhaps. So we're entering, even without a recession, we're entering a different era, and it's certainly a more uncertain era. And I hope we can frame the discussion around that.
And also our
Eugenie,
global mayors are clearly affected by what's happening with the foreign aid and the tariffs and what that's going to mean for their national governments. And you're much more dependent, Mayor Moya and Mayor Pumarejo, on intergovernmental transfers from your national government and what this is all going to mean for you. So we have lots of uncertainty, not just around the world here. So it's going to call for some real talent on your parts.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask Mayor Moya. You tabled the first balanced budget in many years for Tshwane, and but you've also, in some of the videos I've watched of you speaking, you've talked about some of the real strains you have. You have a big infrastructure gap, which is common across American cities and states as well. You also have some very significant public health issues in terms of the percentage of your population that is HIV positive or tuberculosis positive. How are you balancing these very significant short-term and long-term issues against the need to provide public services every day?
I think just to touch on what you were raising about the grant funding from other spheres of government. So in South Africa, we are the third sphere. We've got national, we've got provincial. And over the years, that funding has been declining because at a national level, we're starting to have financial constraints. And as a city, we must be creative about how we fund our needs. And it's quite difficult because the economic growth in the city in 2011, it was at 6%. In 2023, it was at 0.3%. And what it means for us practically is that we have to fund our service delivery needs through revenue collection. And if you're 39% of your population is unemployed, that means those are the people that get into the indigent register, meaning you must give them services for free. So the issue of finances, it's becoming a real issue in South Africa, which I think it also gives us an opportunity in terms of partnerships, where we come from a culture where, most residents or citizens would say government must provide. Government now must be creative in how do we partner up with the private sector, that if we don't have to pay for something, we can partner with private sector. Let's do that so we can free the cash to do the things for residents who cannot afford the services. I thought it was important to touch on that. Secondly, our infrastructure needs for 10 years, it's at 65 billion rands. But the budget we're talking about, it's only 2.4 billion rand that we are investing. If we're going with this trend, that means 65 years just to take care of a 10-year demand in terms of infrastructure. What that means is that the ailing infrastructure that we are dealing with now on water and electricity, roads infrastructure, the housing opportunities, we are unable to respond to those. And so with platforms like this, U20, C40, Bloomberg, all these platforms that we've been given access to, is also for us to now start mobilizing the investment and the partnerships to assist us to deal with the issue of infrastructure demands. But we also have social issues that we must respond to. About 22% of our population in Tshwane live below poverty line. Most of those either the elderly or child-headed households, meaning we must set money aside to take care of their daily needs in terms of food and, and other, social, needs that they may have. And you mentioned the issue of AIDS. HIV/AIDS, we launched our first Tshwane AIDS Council on Monday. We don't have money as the city to properly invest in this, and 22% of our population are infected. I mean, that's a lot. And you understand that when you're talking about that percentages of HIV/AIDS, you're not only talking about sick people, you're also talking about the social circumstances, the households they come from, the communities they come from. And therefore, that's why for us, we want to ramp up revenue collection, but we don't want to do that without taking care of the root cause, which is the economic growth. So we've passed an economic revitalization strategy where we want to focus on that so that more households have food on their table and are able to afford the services that we offer as the city. So those are some of the balance that we're trying to get right. And of course, we are rallying up communities to support us so that, if we have the support of business, we're able to get far than when it's just government talking.
That's absolutely fascinating. I wonder if the other mayors would chime in about economic revival strategies, short-term and long-term. You're all facing a bunch of short-term pressures and uncertainties, but you've also got long-term needs like housing, transportation, and whatever happens to Medicaid, which is federal state aid for poor American healthcare aid for poor Americans. So, let's do a bit of a roundtable here on we've outlined the problems. What are some of the strategies that you're surfacing to get over this big hump? Stephanie, you've been through this before. I remember you telling me when we first met about some of Syracuse's ancient water and sewer pipes. How are you going to how is the city going to get over this now? And when you're teaching your classes, what are you telling your students?
Well, I just want to respond. I couldn't help but think, that the problems that cities have, whether as I listened to the mayor in South Africa talk about it, or in Colombia, they're the same problems. The scale is different. Obviously, the scale is different in terms of the size, but they are the same kind of problems. And the solutions, interestingly enough, are very similar too, that we looked for partners that would help us drive innovation and have seed capital so that we could have small term successes that we could say we could scale to other places. So whether that was the philanthropic community, whether that was the higher education community, and sometimes it was peer governments that we did this. Part of being in a city, I think, that makes it so exciting is you do have that opportunity to be very dynamic to try to solve these problems. And when you are looking at this kind of crisis across the board, what that opens up is the ability to do things differently that you wouldn't have been able to do before if the funding streams were constant, if people, were feeling like they had a certain level of expectation. Now that there's so much uncertainty, you can now start to look at things and do things differently because you can really say to your constituents, if we don't do it this way, there's no other way. And part of that also, I wanted to say back to Eugenie's earlier point about, and your point about all of these, the COVID money and suggesting strongly to leadership, be good financial stewards of this money. In the environment that we have and in a democracy, when people say, I have this, I have this need, it is very difficult to turn to the people who are your bosses, the voters and constituents and say, sorry, I'm not going to hire more police officers because you feel unsafe. I'm not going to repair these roads. We're going to have to go through another, another couple of cycles. That's just the dynamic of being in a democracy.
Steve, you've when we were talking before the program, you were talking about some of Austin's longer term housing strategies that you've been involved in. That's certainly one way of keeping the economy going. But tell us something about that.
Well, I think that, one of the lessons that everyone learns over time is that so many things are cyclical. I can think of several instances where the city's faced significant budget constraints and shortfalls. One of the best things you can do for those periods of time are to plan for them. As a city, we pretty significantly increased the annual reserve budget that we squirrel away with nuts, so that in the wintertime we can eat. And that's a hard thing to do because everybody wants to spend available funding when it's there. But boy, it sure is nice right now to have that. We have about just less than 20% of our total general fund budget in reserve that we can draw against. In a period of time when there was significant economic growth, we floated bonds and got borrowing capacity. We couldn't get those kinds of things now. 3 different affordable housing elections we had in that period of time, but we also authorized a mass transit program that, but for the federal component, looks pretty strong, and initiated work at the airport. So I think planning for them is a real important thing. The projects we've seen now that are moving forward are probably more the public private partnership projects that are being driven not only by municipal need, but tie into a larger market need. And then you try to come up with, as again, Mayor Minor was saying, kind of innovative solutions. We have a housing conservancy that was created here for a nonprofit organization partnership. It's an open-end fund, happens outside of government, but to buy Class C apartments before they're purchased by the marketplace. Pays a low return but low risk, so it's been able to attract investment from the private market. So I think a lot of it is coming up with innovative solutions.
Jaime, you are cities in Colombia aren't necessarily able to float bonds, nor in South Africa. It seems to me you managed to get a bond issue, as I remember. What did you do to get that?
Oh, it's not easy because there are a lot of rules, but at the same time, although there's a process, you have to work with national government to get okay in certain instances, and you end up going through a lot of loopholes. One is the loophole of, does the government want to help you out or not? So they make it a political issue, and I had to use senators, and basically we blocked more than $4 billion worth of debt that the Colombian government was trying to get with the multilateral banks for certain projects. I think it was 4 or 40, I don't remember, for $100 million debt that we wanted to take. So we were able to stop them from getting their debt until they put our debt through the same process. But this was because of Congress that we were able to do it. On the other side, working with multilateral banks, we worked with the IDB, we worked with AFD to create, for example, the first synthetic currency loan in local currency with AFD. And that was very hard, but and we took about a year to be able to take that down. But in the end, it was making sure that we had our technical staff was had the ability to explain and to push national government to make the change and to give them the pushback, because they will try and swamp you with numbers and regulations and codes that if you know your way around it, you're able to, I guess, push back. So yes, we were able to do that, and we also were able to emit bonds, which, as I say, is regulated. You can do it, but they always find a reason to say no, or a reason to stall it. And if you're a mayor, as my colleagues know, you have 4 years and you have to deliver results within 4 years. So sometimes you have to take the not the best option, which would be to float bonds, which would be to get multilateral bank support, but you have to get a commercial loan instead, because then you will not give your constituents what they are needing. So we've begun or we were able to change and challenge the IDB, for example, because when we started talking to them, I had a brand new development plan. When they were going to give me the money, I had already spent what I needed on the stuff that I was building and doing. So we were able to challenge them and say, don't give me a loan for new things. Give me an indicator-based loan. And they had never given this to a city. They always gave it to the national government. And I said, if you don't give me that, then I can't use your $100 million or the 170 from AFD. And they were able to change their ideas of how they loan to cities. And they gave us an indicator-based loan. And that made a big difference, because if not, I would be paying more than $300 million in aggregate not at a 25-year term at a very low interest rate, but at a 10, 12-year term at a very high interest rate, at more than triple the cost for a multilateral bank. So yeah, it does make a big difference. And I think knowledge and a little political push is important.
And by IDB, you're talking about the Inter-American Development Bank, I'm assuming. Am I correct about that?
And the French Development Agency, AFD.
Right. So that points out one of the great differences between U.S. states and cities, universities, nonprofits, and pretty much the rest of the world is the U.S. has a well-developed state and local finance market called the municipal bond market, which is worth about $4 trillion. Congress may or may not take away some of the tax advantage, tax subsidies that this market has. But even if Congress does, the market's not going to go away. It currently taps almost exclusively domestic savings, because foreign investors don't really need a tax exemption from federal taxes. But it's well developed and very deep. So even small communities can borrow relatively easily, mostly for capital projects, schools, roads, sewage plants, and whatnot. So there's a difference there.
It's a huge difference. And
Yeah.
It requires a good relationship with the national government, because the national government holds the reins in so much of this.
And you've all talked about in various ways public-private partnerships. Maybe we can, in the few minutes we have left, we can elaborate a little bit about how how your cities have used these to your advantage. They're not easy. The investors or equity investors very often demand equity type returns, which are higher than bond returns over the long term. So if we were to just go round the table, Mayor Moya, you mentioned dealing with private investors, and maybe the other mayors can add in what your strategies have been.
I think from our side, one is to let the private sector in terms of the infrastructure, for instance, that we know that we can't afford. We then put it out to the market. For instance, we've got a project to reclaim our inner city, and there's a lot of hijacked properties there that we can hand over to the private sector with our conditions, because we are a youth, young population because of the universities that are in our city. So about 65% of South African graduates, they come from the city of Tshwane universities. And so we've got that. And also because we are an administrative capital, we've got a lot of young people that come to start their careers here. So we're also looking for low-cost housing in addition to business. So one is to let them in terms of what the opportunities that they can take advantage of. We have a big challenge though in South Africa that a triple P, it takes no less than 2 years to complete. As a result, we're forced to give to private sector to run with this without getting involved as government, because the moment it's a triple P, it's a very regulated process, which needs the okaying of the National Treasury. And so it becomes very complicated for us that we end up just leasing property, leasing this, because we're avoiding the route of triple P, which I think is quite helpful to the residents in terms of the benefits. But that's how we basically do it. We just let in private sector to take over where as government we can't. And but our limitation is the issue of triple P. And even when we're getting a foreign investment, we need our National Treasury to be the one that okays it. And I mean, we talk about a department that deals with 257 municipalities. It's never a straightforward process for us.
Mayor Adler, Steve, you were mentioning both private investors, but also what happens if the community tax exemption goes away as a concern. So, tell us about the city's capital structures and what could happen going forward.
Well, we're concerned. I mean, I take the point that you made about foreign investment not needing the tax break, and I hope you're right, and I hope Congress doesn't mess with the tax exempt status. I am concerned about that. It's a significant cost savings for United States investors, and these two probably know better than I do, but I'm fearful of what could happen if that legislation in Congress passes. We had a Major League Soccer team come to the city. We avoided any public financing of the stadium. We helped set it up so that the owners of the team were able to make a pretty significant private real estate play on the land around the stadium, such that the numbers worked for them, which was great. So we ended up getting that stadium built without any public involvement, which was really good for our city. I would send people to take a look at the Texas Housing Conservancy, because that was you can get, the market will pay for market housing. There's subsidized housing, but there's workforce housing that is not covered by either. And this solution that just won the international award from the ULI, the Urban Land Institute, actually uses the government to de-risk investment in older existing affordable housing, so that the private market can invest in that housing with their bond monies. So you're not looking for a philanthropic contribution. You're not looking for their higher development risk portfolios, but you're going after their component, their low risk, usually invested in bonds, and making the argument that we can de-risk some of these housing investments to get a piece of that lower risk funding in portfolios of foundations. And PNC Bank just put in a $10 million contribution into that fund, and it's just started now, and it's preserved 3,000 units in our city that would have been lost to gentrification. So, being creative on ideas like that.
Who else would like to jump in on public-private partnerships and housing? Stephanie, I see you're thinking.
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Stephen and Jaime said. Part of what you can do in this kind of environment is say to investors, that you can have less risk if you take a longer term. And with the market being so risky and so much unpredictability, I think there would be an appetite to that. In Syracuse, we have had success in building subsidized housing through that, saying to the private market, look, if you invest in these bonds for 10 years, you'll get a lower rate of return, but you will get that rate of return. The other thing that you can do too, I just want to piggyback on what Steve was saying and also how important the municipal market is. Bonding helps us with cash flow. It helps us with infrastructure. It's just exceedingly important. But another thing that you can do in cities is look to help the nonprofits and the smaller entities build capacity. They're often operating on a shoestring budget. And by working with them or being closer to them, you can help them increase their output. And that can take many different forms. Sometimes that's helping them with technology. Sometimes it's helping them with personnel. Sometimes it is just rewriting the zoning laws so that zoning is not as onerous for development. And that can help not only the nonprofit community, but it can help any sort of developers. Land use is primarily within the jurisdiction of the local government, and making it be less regulated helps the speed and can help development.
What, Jaime, you talked about before about getting private investors involved in some of your green economy initiatives. How difficult was that? What kind of terms did you have to offer?
Well, I think what we have to try and do is two things. One is when we're trying to do a public-private partnership, what we've learned is we have to make it interesting, and you have to give them clear rules. So sometimes, as Stephanie was saying, you don't have to give them the best return. You have to give them clear rules and an appetite for a reduced risk. So, for example, our president is going through the hoops, and he's trying to change the law to make every healthcare provider that provides free healthcare to Colombians, make it a public entity. And he's trying to change the law for that, which we believe is a huge mistake. Because, for example, what we were able to do in Barranquilla is we created a public-private partnership where 65% is owned by the city, 35% is owned by the public sector, but they help us manage in a more or less 50-50 governance structure. And they're making money, and we're providing a great service, and we're competing with the private sector. And we are the leading healthcare provider in the city. We are 800 meters from everybody's house. We have 45 centers, and it works. But it doesn't work because we force anybody or because we gave the private sector the best possible business. There's people that are making more business. But we told them, if you make a business with us of saving lives and providing good healthcare, we're gonna be your partners for the next 30 years. And this is more or less what you can expect. And there's a stop loss if there's a loss that was not foreseeable and avoidable, and if it's at no fault of the provider. So we reduce risk, and we're able to offer something that is worthwhile. And the same is for our housing market, for example, where as a group of, I was Minister of Housing as well for Colombia before, and I grouped with a couple of ministers that have kept the same idea of how to build social housing during the last couple of decades. We were able to create a system that creates a market. It builds the market. So if you build these types of homes, then you will get a subsidized rate from the government through the bank. And what we were able to do was sit down with developers, create a plan, say, how can we build a constant pipeline? And Barranquilla is the fourth biggest city in Colombia. It's 1.5 million people. But we were the second biggest social development housing area in the country. So we are the fourth largest city, but we have the second biggest housing market. And that was because we were able to zone, we were able to work with urban developers and create clear rules. I think people forget that certainty, clear rules, and a reduced risk is sometimes more important than going all in on returns. And I think that's what the world needs right now, actually.
One of the themes here at OECD is that cities are caring places. And I think what we've heard today from all of you is you are caring and have been caring with all the terrible news we've heard about budgets and so forth. In the end, you're caring. And we certainly appreciate what you've been telling us about that.
Indeed, we do. And those constructive remarks, pardon the pun, that is going to be it for this edition of Special Briefing. Thanks so much to Eugenie Birch and our panel of extraordinary mayors. Special thanks to our production team, of course, Megan Schmigdal, Shannon Mannon, Amy Montgomery, Delfina Vildosola, Graham Dowd, and Noah Ritzenberg. And thanks as well to the Travelers Institute, the Volcker Alliance, and members of the Penn IUR Advisory Board for your very generous support. I'll be back with Susan Wachter on Thursday, May 8th for a deep dive into how federal retrenchment in the U.S. is impacting state and local budgets after the post-COVID spending boom. We're going to dig into the muni tax exemption as well, I'm sure. So please watch our websites and your email for details, and remember to catch up on this and all of our other special briefings on our podcast. And so for now, I'm Bill Glasgall on behalf of Eugenie Birch. Thanks again, Eugenie, and our team, and we'll see you again on May 8th.